A 19 anni, Sadie Hawkins percorse la navata di una fredda cappella di pietra con un abito che non era suo, dirigendosi verso un uomo che non aveva mai scelto, per suggellare un patto che non aveva mai accettato. La sua matrigna l'aveva venduta, non con katane, non con crudeltà mascherata da amore, ma con la silenziosa efficienza di una donna che salda un debito. E l'uomo che l'attendeva all'altare, appoggiato a un bastone con la punta d'argento, con gli occhi scuri fissi nel vuoto, era il duca di Redfield, un uomo che i pettegolezzi della società definivano distrutto, amareggiato e da evitare. Ciò che nessuno disse a Sadie. Ciò che nessuno si prese la briga di menzionare era che dietro quegli occhi freddi si celava un uomo che aveva smesso di credere che qualcuno lo avrebbe mai visto come qualcosa di diverso dalla sua ferita. E ciò che nessuno disse al duca era che la ragazza che marciava verso di lui con la furia impressa in ogni passo delle sue scarpette bianche stava per diventare la cosa più scomoda che gli fosse mai capitata. Qualcuno che si rifiutava di essere invisible. Se questa storia vi ha già conquistati, continuate a leggere. Lasciate un commento qui sotto. Squadra Sadie o squadra Robert. Vediamo come stanno le cose. Il salotto di casa Hawkins aveva visto decenni migliori. Le tende, un tempo di un bordeaux intenso, erano sbiadite in un rosa polveroso che nessuna quantità di luce pomeridiana riusciva a ravvivare. L'argento sul camino aveva perso la sua lucentezza anni prima, e il quadro sopra il caminetto, un ritratto rigido del defunto Lord Hawkins. Sembrava osservare la stanza con la rassegnata delusione di un uomo che aveva previsto proprio questo tipo di declino. Sadie era seduta vicino alla finestra, con un libro aperto in grembo, gli occhi non sulle pagine ma sul giardino sottostante, dove il giardiniere stava perdendo la sua eterna battaglia con una siepe di rose troppo cresciuta. Era un martedì inizio autunno, il tipo di giornata che profumava vagamente di pioggia e di addii, e Sadie aveva la netta sensazione che qualcosa stesse per andare storto. Nei suoi 19 anni aveva imparato a fidarsi di quella sensazione. Sentì la sua matrigna prima ancora di vederla. Il preciso ticchettio dei tacchi di Lady Aldrich Hawkins sul parquet. Ogni passo era ponderato, ogni pausa calcolata. Lady Aldrich entrò nel salotto come entrava in ogni stanza, come se avesse già deciso cosa sarebbe successo lì dentro. Era una donna affascinante, la matrigna di Sadie. Nessuno poteva negarlo. Alta, composta, con i capelli scuri, acconciati in uno stile che comunicava al contempo eleganza e disciplina. Possedeva quel tipo di bellezza che le era sempre sembrata meno un dono e più un'arma che aveva imparato a usare. Non era crudele in modo drammatico. Era semplicemente efficiente e l'efficienza, Sadie aveva imparato a capire, poteva essere una forma di crudeltà. Dietro di lei, sospesa sulla soglia con l'espressione di chi desiderava ardentemente essere altrove, c'era Millicent, la sorellastra di Sadie, 17enne, tutta riccioli dorati e occhi ansiosi. Millicent aveva gli zigomi di Lady Aldrich e la tendenza al panico del padre. Lanciò a Sadie un'occhiata che diceva chiaramente «Mi dispiace per qualunque cosa stia per accadere». Sadie chiuse il libro. Lady Aldrich sedeva di fronte a lei, con le mani giunte in grembo, e disse senza preamboli, «Vi sposerete». Sadie udì le parole, le comprese una per una. Era il loro accordo, il loro specifico accordo, che richiedeva un attimo per essere assimilato. «Chiedo scusa», disse, e la sua voce era ammirevolmente calma. «Al duca di Redfield», continuò Lady Aldrich come se Sadie non avesse parlato. «Il contratto è già stato redatto. La cerimonia si terrà tra 3 settimane, nella cappella della sua tenuta nella provincia settentrionale». Nella stanza calò un silenzio assoluto. Persino le tende sembrarono immobilizzarsi. Il duca di Redfield. Sadie ripeté lentamente. Conosceva quel nome. Tutti in ogni salotto, dalla capitale alla costa, conoscevano quel nome. Robert Redfield, il sesto duca di Redfield, che era andato in guerra, come un ufficiale celebrato ed era tornato, con un bastone e la reputazione di far pentire amaramente chiunque lo guardasse con pietà, che non aveva partecipato a un solo evento sociale in 2 anni, che si diceva fosse, a seconda di chi lo diceva, solitario, tormentato, terrificante, o tutte e tre le cose contemporaneamente. Ha bisogno di una moglie. Lady Aldrich ha detto che si è informato. È stato raggiunto un accordo che soddisfa le sue esigenze e risolve alcune pressioni che gravano su questa casa. Debiti, disse Sadie seccamente. Intende debiti. Lady Aldrich non si scompose. Intendo obblighi. Suo padre, che Dio lo abbia in gloria, ha lasciato questa famiglia in una situazione che richiede una gestione creativa. L'assegno del duca è più che generoso. Assicurerà la stagione di Millicent, il mantenimento di questa casa e il benessere di questa famiglia per il prossimo futuro. E cosa? Chiese Sadie. Assicura anche a me? Una brevissima pausa, di quelle che contenevano una risposta che Lady Aldrich non intendeva dare. Il titolo di ducessa, disse, sicurezza, una grande casa, più di quanto la maggior parte delle giovani donne nella tua particolare situazione potrebbe ragionevolmente aspettarsi. La particolare situazione di Sadie. Non le sfuggì la formulazione. La sua particolare situazione era che era la figlia del primo matrimonio del defunto, Lord Hawkins prima di Lady Aldrich, prima di Millicent, prima dei debiti e delle tende spiedite. La sua particolare situazione significava che non aveva una dote di cui parlare, nessuna potente conoscenza propria e una matrigna che amava la figliastra esattamente quanto bastava per le apparenze sociali e non un briciolo di più. Guardò Millicent, ancora in bilico sulla soglia. L'espressione di Millicent era passata da scusante a qualcosa di peggio. Sollievo perché il duca aveva chiesto e Lady Aldrich aveva preso una decisione e la decisione non era stata militante. E per quanto Sadie amasse la sua sorellastra, la amasse veramente nel modo complicato di sorelle che condividono un padre e poco altro. Quello sguardo di sollievo fece sì che qualcosa di duro e luminoso si accendesse nel suo petto. Non lo farò, disse Sadie. L'espressione di Lady Aldrich non cambiò. Capo, lo farai. Non puoi costringermi a sposare un uomo che non ho mai incontrato. Posso, disse Lady Aldrich, con la serenità di chi ha già valutato le proprie opzioni e le ha ritenute soddisfacenti. Rendi l'alternativa sufficientemente spiacevole da farti scegliere questa. Si alzò dalla sedia, lasciandosi le gonne. 3 settimane. Sadie, ti suggerisco di usare questo tempo per adeguare la tua aspettativa piuttosto che le tue obiezioni. Il duca non è noto per la sua pazienza, e temo che nemmeno io lo sia. Se ne andò. Millicent emise un piccolo gemito di dolore e scomparve dietro di lei. Sadie rimase seduta sola nel salotto, ormai spento, con il libro ancora chiuso in grembo, e guardò il giardino, dove la siepe di Rose aveva preso il sopravvento. La cappella nella tenuta di Redfield aveva 400 anni e li dimostrava, nel migliore dei modi. Muri di pietra scuriti dal tempo, strette finestre di vetro colorato, che proiettavano sfumature di blu e verde sul pavimento, un soffitto che si inarcava sopra come l'interno di una preghiera. In circostanze diverse, Sadie avrebbe potuto trovarlo bellissimo. In queste circostanze, lo trovava una gabbia molto elegante. Se ne stava in piedi in fondo alla cappella, con l'abito preso in prestito, di seta color avorio, leggermente troppo lungo neglia, gono con manice che suggerivano un'epoca completamente diversa, e guardava l'uomo, che l'aspettava, all'altare. Si aspettava un uomo anziano, si era preparata mentalmente alla vecchiaia, o a qualcosa che corrispondesse alla parola rotto, qualcosa di sminuito e pietoso che potesse gestire, che potesse sopportare. Non si era preparata a Robert Redfield. Era alto, e il bastone non ne diminuiva la statura, con spaglie larghe, in un cappotto scuro, che gli calzava con la precisione di C. Si vestiva ancora come un soldato, anche se non lo era più. I suoi capelli erano castano scuro, leggermente troppo lunghi per la moda del momento. E il suo viso, il viso che l'aveva vista entrare da una quindicina di metri di distanza, senza cambiare minimamente espressione, era il viso di un uomo che un tempo era stato, e forse era ancora, straordinariamente bello. La masella era forte, gli occhi più scuri di quanto si aspettasse, incastonati sotto sopracciglia, che al momento assumevano un'espressione di completa e studiata neutralità. Si appoggiava al bastone con la punta d'argento con la disinvoltura di chi ha molta esperienza, non come se fosse una stampella, ma tenendolo al fianco come un uomo che ha deciso che, se deve portare un fardello, lo porterà con style. Sadie avanzò perché, durante il tragitto in carrozza, aveva deciso che non avrebbe dato a nessuno, né a Lady Aldrich, né ai testimoni riuniti, e certamente non al duca, la soddisfazione di vederla esitare. Sarebbe entrata in quella cappella. Avrebbe sopportato quella cerimonia e poi avrebbe impiegato la considerevole intelligenza che Dio le aveva donato per capire cosa fare dopo. Raggiunse l'altare, non guardò l'officiante, guardò il duca da vicino. I suoi occhi non erano semplicemente scuri, erano di una profonda e particolare tonalità di marrone quasi ambrata ai bordi e la fissavano con un'espressione che non riusciva a decifrare immediatamente, non crudeltà, non trionfo, non lo sguardo di un uomo che aveva fatto un acquisto ed era soddisfatto del suo acquisto. Era, avrebbe pensato più tardi, lo sguardo di un uomo che non sapeva bene come reagire a una sorpresa. Signorina Hawkins, disse lui, con voce bassa, persino modulata con precisione, la voce di un uomo che aveva imparato a tenere basso, il tono perché aveva scoperto che le voci sommesse attirano più attenzione di quelle alte. Vostra grazia, disse lei. E poi, poiché aveva deciso di non fingere, aggiunse, voglio che sappiate che sono qui contro voglia. Qualcosa gli attraversò il viso molto velocemente, quasi impercettibile. Forse era divertimento. Era difficile esserne certi. Lo so, disse lui. Volevo semplicemente assicurarmi che iniziassimo questo accordo con onesta piuttosto che con finzione. Rimase in silenzio per un attimo. Poi una preferenza ragionevole, le efficiente. Si schiarì la gola. Si sposarono in fortini minuti. Era, pensò Sadie, la catastrofe più efficiente della sua vita. Redfield Hall non era come se l'era aspettata. E questo stava diventando un tema ricorrente. Aveva immaginato qualcosa di tetro, un cumulo gotico di pietre, privo di gargoyle pieno di spifferi, con la sensazione pervasiva di una miseria accumulata. Invece trovò una casa di sorprendente eleganza. Ampi corridoi tappezzati di ritratti e mappe, stanze spaziose ma non fredde, finestre che catturavano la luce del mattino e la trattenevano come qualcosa di prezioso. I giardini erano immacolati. La biblioteca, che intravide brevemente attraverso una porta aperta mentre veniva accompagnata nelle sue stanze, era enorme. La governante, la signora Parton, era una donna minuta ed efficiente, forse Santen, che dava l'impressione di aver servito quella famiglia per così tanto tempo da essersi fatta un'opinione personale al riguardo. Accompagnò Sadie in una suite nell'ala est, una camera da letto, un salotto, uno spogliatoio chiaramente preparato con cura, fiori freschi sulla toeletta, il fuoco già acceso, libri sul comodino, il che faceva pensare a una coincidenza o a una minima ricerca. Il duca cena alle 7, disse la signora Pardon, a meno che non abbia scritto, nel qual caso può cenare alle 8 o più tardi. Preferis la piccola sala da pranzo. Non riceve conversazione a colazione, ma non gli dispiace a cena. Passeggia per i giardini ogni mattina, tempo permettendo, a partire dalle 6. Non desidera essere disturbato nel suo studio tra le 2 e le 5 del pomeriggio. Sadie ascoltò questa elencazione delle abitudini di un uomo con l'attenzione di C. Viene informato prima di entrare in territorio conteso e ha delle preferenze? Chiese a proposito di sua moglie. La signora Pardon riflette sulla questione con la cura di una donna che sceglie le parole da una gamma di verità disponibili. Sua Grazia, disse, non ha mai avuto una moglie prima. Immagino che per adattarsi dovrà fare un po' di destrezza da entrambe le parti. Una pausa. Non è scortese, mia signora. Vorrei che lo sapeste. Sadie assimilò queste parole. Mamma è stato solo per molto tempo, disse la signora. Pardon, e si è abituato a questa situazione. Disse comodo nel modo in cui si dice comodo, quando si intende qualcosa di più complicato. Non ti renderà facile conoscerlo. Questo non sarà un riflesso del tuo valore. Sarà un riflesso delle sue abitudini. Sadie pensò che fosse la cosa più onesta che qualcuno le avesse detto da settimane. Ringraziò la governante con il primo calore autentico che avesse provato in tutta la giornata. La cena di quella prima sera si tenne nella piccola sala da pranzo, che poteva ospitare 12 persone, ma era apparecchiata per 2 a un'estremità del lungo tavolo. Il duca era già seduto quando lei arrivò. Si alzò quando lei entrò. Automaticamente pensò per buone maniere radicate piuttosto che per una particolare attenzione e aspettò che lei si sedesse prima di riprendere posto. La distanza tra loro al tavolo era di circa 2 metri. Nel silenzio però sembrava considerevolmente maggiore. Un cameriere versò il vino, apparve la suppa. Sadie guardò il duca. Il duca guardò la sua suppa. Me lo dice la signora Parton, disse Sadie. Perché il silenzio stava iniziando ad assumere una personalità, e quella personalità non le piaceva. Che lei possiede una biblioteca con circa 4 volumi. Il duca alzò lo sguardo. Più vicino a 6.000, disse. Il catalogo non è stato aggiornato dai tempi di mio padre. L'ho visto brevemente mentre passavo. La sessione di geografia sembra corposa. Una pausa. Qualcosa cambiò quasi impercettibilmente nella sua espressione. Nota la sessione di geografia. I dorsi sono più consumati degli altri. Qualcuno li ha letti. Mio padre viaggiò molto prima che la sua salute peggiorasse. Ho ereditato sia i libri che l'abitudine di leggerli. Lei ha viaggiato anche lei. Molto. Dis, e poi, con un tono piatto, che chiuse l'argomento come una porta. Le guerre mi hanno portato, in diversi continenti, leo trovate istrutive, cum tendono ad esserlo le catastrofi. Sadie non insistet. Aveva la sensazione che quest'uomo offrisse informazioni in piccole dosi, accuratamente selezionate, e che cercare di ottenere più di quanto offerto avrebbe significato non ricevere nulla. Poteva accontentarsi di piccole dosi. Aveva tempo. Vorrei poter accedere alla biblioteca, disse invece, se per lei va bene. La casa è sua, disse lui. E s'era qualcosa nel modo in cui lo disse, non espansivo, non generoso, ma cauto, come se stesse ricalibrando il significato di quelle parole. Questo la spinse a guardarlo più attentamente. Stava guardando il suo bicchiere di vino. La sua mano sinistra era appoggiata sul tavolo, e lei notò per la prima volta la debole traccia di una cicatrice sul dorso, pallida contro l'olivastro della sua pelle, un residuo di qualcosa che ancora non conosceva. Grazie, disse. Lui annuì una volta e tornò alla sua zuppa. Non era, rifletté Sadie, quello che si definirebbe un inizio caloroso, ma non era nemmeno freddo. Era qualcosa di più interessante di entrambi. Era stanco. E la cautela, aveva sempre scoperto, era qualcosa su cui si poteva lavorare. Si era preparata con cupa praticità per la prima notte di nozze. Si era detta che era una cosa da sopportare, che donne in circostanze peggiori avevano sopportato cose peggiori e che ce l'avrebbe fatta. Ciò per cui non si era preparata era il bussare alla sua porta alle 10 e il duca in piedi nel corridoio completamente vestito, con una candela in mano e l'espressione di un uomo che ha provato e riprovato quello che vuole dire. E non è del tutto sicuro che la prova sia stata sufficiente. Volevo dire, iniziò e si interruppe, riprovò. Sono consapevole che questa situazione non è una in cui sei entrata volontariamente. Sadi rima sulla soglia della sua stanza in vestaglia, con I capelli sciolti sulle spalle e lo guardo, no, concordò. Voglio assicurarti, disse, che non lo farò, che non ho alcuna intenzione di. Si interruppe di nuovo, la macella si contrasse. Come si contrae la masella di un uomo quando si trova a dire qualcosa che richiede più vulnerabilità di quanta ne avesse prevista. Non ti ciderò nulla che tu non abbia, che non ti venga offerto liberamente. La candela nella sua mano era perfettamente immobile. I suoi occhi, tuttavia, non lo erano. C'era qualcosa dietro di essi, qualcosa di cauto, di riservato. Osservando la sua reazione con l'attenzione di un uomo che si aspettava di essere deriso, Sadi sentì, contro ogni buon senso, una piccola e scomoda ondata di qualcosa che non era proprio gratitudine e non era proprio dolcezza, ma che si trovava da qualche parte nelle vicinanze di entrambe. Cioè, disse, scegliendo le parole con altrettanta cura, un'affermazione più premurosa di quanto mi aspettassi stasera. Qualcosa attraversò il suo viso. Sono generalmente capace di considerazione, disse. Semplicemente non sono sempre capace di dimostrarla in modo leggibile. L'ho notato, disse lei, e poi, poiché mi sembrava importante, cercherò di estenderti la stessa cortesia, vostra grazia. Non posso promettere di essere una compagnia facile, ma cercherò di essere una compagnia onesta se questo ha un qualche valore. La guardò per un lungo momento di silenzio, in cui la fiamma della candela si mosse leggermente e proiettò ombre sul suo viso, ammorbidendone i lineamenti, facendolo guardare brevemente, come un uomo più giovane, un uomo che non aveva ancora partecipato alle guerre. È di notevole valore, disse, e poi, prima che lei potesse rispondere, buonanotte, signorina, si fermò. Sadi, il suo nome pronunziato da lui, era diverso da come si aspettava. Non come si pronunzia il nome di uno sconosciuto. Qualcosa di più coto. Buonanotte, Robert, disse. I suoi occhi si posarono sui suoi solo per un istante. Sorpreso, pensò, dal suono del suo nome di battesimo, come se fosse passato molto tempo dall'ultima volta che qualcuno lo aveva usato, si voltò e tornò indietro lungo il corridoio. Lo guardò andare via. La candela che proiettava una luce in movimento davanti a lui, il suo bastone che faceva, il suo suono sommesso sul pavimento di pietra finché non ghirò l'angolo e sparì. Rimase a lungo sulla soglia buia. Tra Sadi e il duca di Redfield c'era una sorta di architettura accurata. Ognuno di loro aveva costruito la propria struttura di abitudini e distanze, e per le prime 2 settimane abitarono quelle strutture con cortesia, con 2 persone che condividono una grande casa senza mai condividere veramente lo stesso spazio. Lei aveva accesso alla biblioteca, compromesso. La frequentò con la meticolosità di chi è stato sottovalutato per così tanto tempo che l'accesso alla conoscenza gli sembra una forma di vendetta. Lesse tutto. Storia, filosofia, la sessione di geografia, così consumata dalle mani di suo padre, e uno scaffale di storia militare, che iniziò a studiare con l'intento segreto di comprendere qualcosa delle guerre che lo avevano lasciato con un bastone e un'espressione chiusa. Camminava ogni mattina. Lei lo osservava dalla finestra della biblioteca non con l'intenzione di spiarlo, ma perché la finestra della biblioteca dava sul giardino est ed era lì che camminava. Non era lento. Quella fu la prima cosa che notò. Qualunque cosa fosse successa alla sua gamba, non aveva permesso che lo rallentasse. Il bastone era un equilibrio, non una stampella, e il suo passo era quello di un uomo che, sotto ogni aspetto, è ancora un soldato, determinato, contenuto, che percorre il terreno. Camminava come se quei luoghi fossero qualcosa con cui stava ancora facendo pace, come se l'atto di attraversare quella terra, quei giardini, fosse una conversazione che aveva avuto con se stesso per molto tempo. Si ritrovò a essere curiosa di lui, il che era scomodo. Non era venuta lì per curiosità. Era venuta lì per protestare sotto costrizione e aveva intenzione di rimanere in uno stato di giusta indignazione finché non si fosse potuto negoziare un accordo più accettabile. La curiosità non faceva parte del piano, eppure trovò un quaderno in biblioteca, un volume rilegato in pelle nascosto dietro, un libro di carte geografiche della costa mediterranea, e lo aprì trovando pagine di schizzi precisi e dettagliati, per lo più mappe, ma disegnati con un'attenzione alla bellezza che andava ben oltre la praticità. Un porto da qualche parte a sud, un passo di montagna, una strada cittadina resa con linee così sottili che le ombre tra gli edifici erano solo accennate, non disegnate, e si poteva, in qualche modo, percepire il peso del sole pomeridiano. Nell'angolo di ogni schizzo, le iniziali AR, F e una data. Lì aveva disegnati lui, il Duca, freddo e solitario. Si era seduto in luoghi stranieri durante o dopo una guerra e aveva realizzato questi disegni straordinari e delicati. Rimise il quaderno esattamente dove l'aveva trovato, dietro il libro di carte geografiche, e non menzionò a Sena, ma che sera lei sedeva di fronte a lui con la consapevolezza di che disegni tra loro, invisibili e complicati, e guardò le sue mani appoggiate sul tavolo, e pensò, ci sei veramente? L'incidente che iniziò a cambiare le cose accade un mercoledì, 3 settimane dopo il loro matrimonio, durante un temporale. Sadie era andata alle scuderie. Aveva scoperto una cavaglia che le piaceva moltissimo, una grigia di nome Frost, ed era stata colta dal repentino cambio di tempo mentre tornava indietro. Stava percorrendo il passaggio coperto che collegava le scuderie alla casa quando sentì attraverso lo spesso muro di pietra un suono inaspettato. Qualcuno era nella vecchia selleria e, a giudicare dai suoni, era piccolo, spaventato, e cercava con tutte le sue forze di non farsi sentire. Aprì la porta e trovò uno degli staglieri, forse di 9 anni, con il fango in faccia e la particolare espressione di un bambino che ha pianto e ha deciso di essere estremamente dignitoso nonostante le prove. Accovacciato dietro una rastrelliera per sele, con un libro aperto in grembo. Lui si alzò di scatto quando lei entrò, stringendo il libro al petto. «Mia signora, mi scusi, non lo stavo facendo. Siediti», disse Sadie con gentilezza. «Cosa stai leggendo?» Il ragazzo guardò il libro che teneva in mano come se potesse rispondergli. Poi, stancamente, l'ho trovato nella spazzatura della vecchia aula. «Mia signora, so che non avrei dovuto. Me lo faccia vedere». Glielo porse. Era un sillabario. Uno vecchio. Le pagine ingiallite e staccate dalla rilegatura, ma leggibili. Un sillabario dell'alfabeto. «Stai imparando a leggere da solo», disse Sadie. Il ragazzo alzò il mento. «Ci sto provando. Non sono andato molto avanti. A che punto sei arrivato?» Una pausa. Poi, con la disperata onestà di chi ha deciso di non avere più nulla da perdere. Fino alla F. Sadie guardò questo bambino, questo ragazzino di nenani accovacciato in una selleria sotto la pioggia per imparare a leggere da un sillabario scartato, e sentì qualcosa si mosse nel suo petto, qualcosa di completamente familiare. Era la sensazione che aveva provato nella casa di suo padre negli anni successivi all'arrivo di Lady Aldrich, nascosta tra la servitù e le scale con una candela e un libro. La sensazione di cercare la conoscenza con entrambe le mani, perché qualcun altro aveva deciso che non le spettava. Mi chiamo Sadie, disse. E tu, Tom, mia signora? Bene, Tom, ti insegnerò dalla G alla Z, e poi ricominceremo dall'inizio come si deve. Si sedette su una rastrelliera per sele. Vieni qui. Tom la guardò con l'espressione di chi non è del tutto sicuro se si tratti di un salvataggio o di un altro tipo di trappola. Poi si sedette accanto a lei e aprì il sillabario. Lei non sapeva che il duca li aveva visti. Stava attraversando il passaggio quando iniziò a piovere e aveva preso lo stesso percorso coperto dai giardini e si era fermato davanti alla porta aperta della selleria. La porta che lei aveva lasciato aperta, perché la pioggia fuori formava una specie di tenda, e aveva visto sua moglie seduta su una rastrelliera per sel in un luogo umido di pioggia, vestito, indicando pazientemente le lettere in un abbozzo malconcio, mentre uno stagliere le ripeteva con l'intensità di qualcuno che sta cercando di disinnescare qualcosa di fragile e importante. Rimase in piedi nel corridoio per 2 minuti interi, guardando attraverso la fessura della porta e poi proseguì. A cena quella sera era più silenzioso del solito. Sadie, che si era abituata a calibrare i suoi silenzi, notò che questo era diverso. Meno il silenzio del ritiro e più il silenzio di qualcuno che sta pensando a qualcosa che lo ha sorpreso. Tom nelle scuderie, disse infine il duca durante la seconda portata. Come ti è sembrato? Sadie alzò lo sguardo. Determinato, disse, e decisamente più avanti con l'alfabeto, che con la F il duca guardò il suo bicchiere di vino. Era arrivato nella tenuta 6 mesi prima dall'ospizio. Lo so, disse Sadie. Mi disse una pausa. Avevo intenzione di organizzare la sua istruzione, disse Robert. E il modo in cui lo disse leggermente troncato, le parole che uscivano ad angolo, con qualcuno che ammette qualcosa che sente di dover fare prima, le disse più della frase stessa. Era su un lista. L'amministrazione della tenuta ha moltissime liste. Allora forse, disse Sadie, con voce leggera, si può spostare in cima. Rimase in silenzio per un momento. Poi, sì, e poi parlerò con la signora Parton domani. Lei lo guardò. Lui continuava a guardare il suo vino. La luce della candela rendeva più visibile l'ambra dei suoi occhi. E lei pensò, non è la prima volta. Il quaderno, in biblioteca, il porto, il passo di montagna, le ombre nelle strade. Hai un talento per questo, disse, vedendo cosa bisogna fare. Sospetto che tu abbia anche un talento per assicurarti che accada. Semplicemente. Fece una pausa, scegliendo attentamente la parola. Deleghi a te stesso il bisogno e ti dimentici dell'accadere. Ai suoi occhi incontrarono ai suoi. Non era proprio un sorriso. Non l'aveva ancora visto sorridere, non veramente, ma qualcosa nella sua espressione cambiò. Un'apertura di qualcosa che era stato tenuto chiuso. Questa, disse, è una valutazione più accurata di quanto vorrei. In genere sono accurata, disse lei. Comincio a capirlo, disse lui, e prese il suo bicchiere di vino. E qualcosa era cambiato tra loro senza che nessuno dei due avesse fatto nulla per cambiarlo. E la cena continuò, ed era più calda di prima. Lei tornò al quaderno da disegno. Per 2 settimane si era ripetuta di averlo rimesso a posto esattamente come l'aveva trovato, e basta, una piccola cosa privata in cui si era imbattuta e a cui non aveva alcun diritto. Ma i disegni la seguivano fuori dalla biblioteca e nel sonno. E un pomeriggio di fine ottobre tornò indietro, prese il libro da dietro il volume di topografia con la cura di chi maneggia qualcosa di fragile e lo portò al davanzale. Questa volta lo sfogliò lentamente, ogni pagina. Il porto che aveva già visto, il passo di montagna, la strada cittadina con il suo implicito calore pomeridiano, un guado fluviale da qualche parte a nord, l'acqua resa con pallide linee tratteggiat, un campo dopo una battaglia. Capii che era quello senza che nessuno glielo dicesse. Dall'assenza di persone, dalla qualità del silenzio, dal modo in cui l'erba era piegata in modo strano, lo osservò a lungo. In fondo al libro, nelle ultime 3 pagine, i disegni erano cambiati. Non erano estranei, erano lì. I giardini di Redfield, la siepe di rose, la serra vista da lontano nella luce del mattino. E sull'ultima pagina, piccola, precisa e innegabile, la finestra della biblioteca vista dall'esterno, con una figura seduta. Una donna, i capelli sciolti, un libro aperto in grembo, il viso leggermente girato verso ciò che si trovava oltre la pagina. Era lei, disegnata dal giardino sottostante, disegnata di recente. La data nell'angolo era di 3 settimane prima, ovvero 2 settimane prima che lei avesse trovato per la prima volta il quaderno da disegno. Il che significava che lui stesso lo aveva rimesso lì, il che significava che lei aveva convissuto con quella consapevolezza per molto tempo. Quella sera portò il quaderno da disegno nel piccolo salotto dove Robert stava leggendo dopo cena, lo posò sul tavolo accanto alla sua poltrona e si sedette di fronte a lui senza dire nulla. Lui guardò il quaderno, poi lei. Qualcosa gli attraversò il viso, qualcosa che non era proprio allarme e non proprio rassegnazione, ma che conteneva elementi di entrambi. L'hai trovato? Disse lui da dietro il volume del registro. Ha confermato lei qualche settimana fa. Capisco. Guardò il libro. Non lo prese. Dovrei spiegare. Non devi, disse lei. Volevo solo che sapessi che li avevo visti. Una pausa. Una pausa. Tutti, compresa l'ultima pagina. Il fuoco crepitava silenziosamente e costantemente all'esterno. Il vento di ottobre soffiava tra i giardini. Disegno ciò che trovo degno di essere osservato, disse lui e la sua voce era molto cauta, come quella di chi rivela una verità che non ha ancora deciso di poter rivelare in tutta sicurezza. Disegno quei giardini da anni. Le composizioni si sono spostate di recente, spostandosi verso la finestra della biblioteca. Sì, Sadie lo guardò. Stava guardando il quaderno da disegno e la linea della sua masella era quella di un uomo che resiste all'attrazione di qualcosa. Robert, disse lei. Lui alzò lo sguardo. Sono contenta che tu l'abbia disegnato, disse semplicemente. Sono contenta di essersi anch'io. Rimase in silenzio per un attimo. Quel silenzio particolare di un uomo che riceve qualcosa che non si era permesso di prevedere. Poi, in silenzio, lo feci anch'io. Lei prese il suo libro. Lui prese il suo. Il quaderno da disegno era appoggiato sul tavolo tra di loro, aperto a nulla, ma presente. Un piccolo oggetto diciarato nello spazio che stavano lentamente, con cura, imparando a condividere. Lo trovò un giovedì sera di ottobre nella vecchia serra. Non lo stava cercando. Stava cercando la signora Pardon per discutere dell'organizzazione del ripostiglio della biancheria nella Laest, che aveva un sistema che nessuno dei presenti sapeva spiegare completamente. La serra era fuori dal sentiero coperto, le sue pareti di vetro appanate dal calore e dall'odor di terra e di cose che crescono, e la porta era leggermente a forma di vaso, ed è così che lei arrivò ad aprirla. Lui era in fondo, in piedi davanti, a un banco da lavoro, tra i vasi di terracotta e le piante rampicanti, e non si era ancora accorto di lei. Aveva appoggiato il bastone al banco e stava usando entrambe le mani per fare qualcosa con una piccola pianta. La stava rimbassando, capì, premendo con cura la terra intorno alle radici con quelle grandi mani segnate dalle cicatrici. Stava lavorando con completa concentrazione. His head bent, his shoulders not quite as square as they were when he knew someone was watching. And his face, the face she had been reading for weeks now, learning its configurations and their meanings, was open in a way she had never seen it, unguarded, almost young. His left leg, bearing full weight without the cane, trembled almost imperceptibly at intervals. A fine tremor, regular, like an instrument trying to hold a note it could no longer quite sustain. He had learned to keep still at those moments, she realized had learned, that the trick was not to shift weight, but to hold it, to refuse to give the leg the permission to fail. She understood, watching him, the daily arithmetic of it, the constant silent calculation of where to stand, when to move, how to appear entirely untroubled by a body that was quietly, regularly betraying him. He had been doing this every day? For how long? Since the war? 3 years. Every room, every corridor, every dinner table. The same negotiation? Invisible to everyone who was not watching closely enough. She had been watching closely enough. She made a small sound, not deliberately, but enough. He heard it. His hands went still on the pot. His body stiffened, not dramatically, but with the particular quality of a man who has been seen doing something he was not prepared to be seen doing. He did not turn around immediately. When he did, his expression had rearranged itself into its usual careful neutrality, but she had seen what was underneath, and they both knew it. I was looking for Mrs. Parton, Sadi said, because giving him a reason for her presence seemed kind. She will be in the kitchen at this hour, he said. His voice was even controlled. Of course, she should have left. She knew she should have left. Instead, she said, "What are you repotting?" A pause. Then, as though deciding something, "Hellor. They bloom in winter." He looked down at the plant. "My mother grew them. She said it was useful to have something that bloomed when everything else had given up." Sadi was very still. She did not say anything. She understood by instinct that this was one of those moments where the wrong word would close everything, and the right word was no word at all. He pressed the last of the earth around the roots, smoothed it with his thumb, and then straightened. His hand found the cane. The neutrality settled back over his face, but differently. Not as armor this time, but as a surface, with the knowledge of what was underneath it present between them both. "I'll tell Mrs. Part, and you were looking for her," he said. "Thank you," Sadi said. She left the greenhouse, walked back along the covered path in the soft October rain, and sat down in the library for a long time without opening a book. She was thinking about a man who grew winter flowers because his mother had taught him to, and who had spent 3 years learning how to make a damaged leg look undamaged, and who hid gentleness the way other people hid weaknesses. She was thinking that she was in a great deal of trouble. It was a night in November, late March, when the fire had burned down to embers, and neither of them had moved to add wood because neither of them particularly wanted the evening to end that he told her. He had not planned to. She had not asked, had made a private decision some weeks earlier not to ask because she understood that some things could only be given freely and would close permanently if reached for. She had simply been present and patient in the way she was patient about many things, and eventually the space she had made was enough. "It was a river crossing," he said, not looking at her, looking at the embers. "In the north, late in the campaign, when we thought the worst was done." He was quiet for a moment. "The intelligence was wrong. The far bank was held. We went in under fire." Sadi did not move, did not speak. She had learned the grammar of his silences well enough now to know that this one required no punctuation from her. "I got most of my men across," he said. "Not all of them. 3 didn't make it." Another pause longer. "The leg was a fall in the river rocks. I didn't feel it at the time. Didn't know how bad until we were on the other side and I couldn't stand." He said this with the flatness of someone who has rehearsed the facts into smoothness to make them easier to carry. "By the time a surgeon reached me, the damage was it had been too long. He did what he could, and the 3 men," Sadi said quietly. Yes, the word was short and entire. It contained everything, the names, the faces, the specific weight of a commander's guilt, which is different from ordinary guilt because it is institutional, is SWN into the rank. "Is the price of the authority you accepted when you accepted the uniform?" "You blame yourself," she said, "not a question. I made the call," he said. "The intelligence was wrong, but the call was mine. I could have waited. I chose not to." He turned the wine glass in his hand slowly. "I have reviewed that decision approximately 10,000 times. I have not yet found the version where I choose differently and everyone lives, but I have not yet stopped looking. That, Sadi said, is not a guilt you will ever fully put down. I think you know that. Yes, but I think she said carefully that there is a difference between carrying it and being buried by it. And I think you have been for 3 years closer to buried than carrying. He was very still. The leg, she continued, is something that happened to your body. The grief for those men is something that happened to your heart. You have been treating them as the same thing, as one single damage, one single reason to withdraw from the world. But they are not the same. She looked at him. You did not fail those men by surviving. You failed no one by coming home with a cane. The silence after that was long and different in quality from the silences before it. When he finally spoke, his voice was not entirely steady. Where? He said. Did you learn to see like that? I grew up, she said, in a house where I had to understand what people were actually saying beneath what they were saying. It is a useful education. He set down the wine glass. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. Not dramatically, not with the urgency of the moment that was still to come, but with a quietness that was more intimate than urgency. A deliberate choice. A man deciding slowly to put something down. I have not told anyone that before, he said. Not all of it. I know, she said. I find, he said, that it is slightly lighter having said it. It will be lighter still, she said. Each time after this, she turned her hand in his. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. That is what I'm here for. Not as a transaction, as a choice. He looked at her in the firelight for a long moment, and then he said very quietly, Thank you, Sadi. Always, she said. The autumn assembly in the local town was, by the standards of the provincial social calendar, an event of some significance. It was also, Sadi understood, from Mrs. Parton's careful explanations, the first social engagement the Duke had agreed to attend in over 2 years. He had agreed to it reluctantly, and with stipulations, because she had mentioned in passing during a dinner at which they had been talking more freely than usual that she had not danced since her father's last birthday party. She had not intended it as a petition, but something in the way she had said it, not wistfully exactly, but with the particular quality of someone noting an absence they had stopped expecting to fill, had apparently worked on him. He had told her the following morning at breakfast, in the tone of someone issuing a matter-of-fact instruction, that they would be attending the autumn assembly on Saturday. She had looked up from her toast. We, if that is agreeable to you, he said, and looked back at his newspaper with the focused attention of a man who is not going to acknowledge that he just did something thoughtful. It is, she said, and returned to her toast and smiled at it privately where he could not see. The assembly rooms were warm and crowded, a condition the local gentry appeared to find entirely desirable, and the Duke of Redfield's arrival with his new Duchess caused precisely the level of sensation that Sadi had predicted and that he had anticipated with grim fatalism. She felt the room adjust itself around them, conversations dipping, resuming louder, eyes moving across them with the practiced indirection of people who have been trained not to stare, but have stared anyway. She watched him receive this attention with the absolute stillness of a man who has decided that the only available response to being looked at is to look back. He was not cold exactly. He was contained. He stood with the cane easy at his side and nodded to those who approached with greetings, and his responses were measured and complete, and no one would have described him as warm, but no one could have called him diminished. They were watching his leg. That was the center of it. That was what every polite glance and careful non-stare was actually doing. Checking for the cane, reading the damage, making their private assessments. She felt a wave of something fierce and protective that surprised her with its intensity. The dancing began. She did not ask him. She had not planned to ask him. She had not even considered it possible. It simply arose in her fully formed the way certain decisions do. She turned to him, and he was watching the floor with an expression that contained very deeply buried something she now knew how to read. The look of a man who wishes and expects not to receive. Dance with me, she said. He looked at her. One dance, she said. The slow one. I've been watching the floor, and there's a position near the window where no one will be behind you. She said this last part without inflection, matter-of-factly, because offering him dignity was more important than performing the consideration. Something moved behind his eyes, complex and rapid, and not entirely comfortable. I have not danced, he said, since before the war. Then it will be new for both of us, she said. I am rather out of practice myself. A very long pause. The music changed. A slow waltz, as she had predicted. The floor shifted and opened. He gave her his hand. They took the position near the window as she had suggested, and she was not going to pretend that the first few steps were not an act of will on his part. She felt the adjustment in his grip when the rhythm required a shift of weight, felt the steadiness he was constructing in real time out of determination and long practice. He was not graceful, not exactly, but he was present entirely, completely present, in a way he was not always, as though the act of this, the music, her hand in his, the necessity of moving through space together, had stripped away the careful structure he maintained and left something more essential. His hand at her waist was warm. His eyes, when they met hers, which they did more than required by the dance, were open in a way she had only glimpsed twice before. In the greenhouse, among the helior, in the corridor outside her room on their first night. You are managing quite well, she said quietly, so only he could hear. I am managing at all, he said, because you chose a position where no one is behind me, and I can calculate the floor. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but its cousin. That was not accidental. No, she agreed. You make a habit, he said, of doing things quietly that require a great deal of thought. I prefer that to making a fuss about the thought and forgetting to do the thing. He looked at her. The music moved them through a turn, and he managed it. And there was something in his face at the completion of it. Not triumph, which would have been the wrong thing, but a settling. A man finding out that something he had been afraid of was survivable. Sadi, he said, and it was different than before. Not careful and controlled, but something less guarded, more direct. I owe you an honest statement. You owe me nothing, she said automatically. I do, he said. You did not choose this. I was aware of that before we married, and I proceeded anyway, because I was persuaded that the arrangement was suitable, and I did not consider sufficiently what suitable meant for you. The hand at her waist tightened fractionally. That was wrong of me. I am sorry for it. Sadi missed half a step. She recovered it. The Duke, to his credit, simply adjusted. That, she said when she had her voice under full control again, is the most words you have said consecutively since I have known you. Yes, he said, I am aware, and yet you said them anyway. I am working, he said, on the theory that honesty is better than silence, even when it is more expensive. She looked at him. He looked at her. The music was doing something slow and inevitable around them. It's a good theory, she said. I will return the expense. I came here in rage. I stayed in refusal. And somewhere between the library and the greenhouse, and a dinner where you agreed to arrange schooling for a 9-year-old in a tack room, I stopped being simply angry. A pause. I am not entirely sure what I am instead, but it is not anger. He did not respond immediately. The dance moved them through one more turn, and then the music gentled toward its close, and they slowed and stopped and stood. I think, he said quietly, that we might be something new. Neither of us has a word for it yet. I can be patient, she said. The corner of his mouth moved again fully this time. A smile, real and rare and a little uneven, as though it hadn't been used recently and needed a moment to find its shape. I'm beginning to understand that you are patient about a great many things, including the things you have every reason not to be patient about. She felt something in her chest that she recognized with a kind of helpless clarity as the point of no return. It was inevitable, perhaps, that the progress they had made would be tested. Growth without friction is not growth. It is simply drift. And the argument, when it came, arrived in the way real arguments always do, not over the thing it was actually about, but over a smaller thing that happened to be carrying the weight of the larger one. It was a letter from Lady Aldrich. Sadi received it one morning in November, 3 months into her marriage, and read it at the breakfast table with a stillness that the Duke, across from her, noticed, but did not immediately comment on. The letter was, in Lady Aldrich's particular style, efficient and warm in its surface, and cold in its intentions. It inquired after Sadi's health. It mentioned Millicent's upcoming season. It noted with careful casualness that the Duke's settlement had resolved the most pressing of the family's obligations, and that Lady Aldrich hoped Sadi understood the extent to which she had. The phrase was used without irony. Served her family. Served her family as though she had brought them a tray. She set the letter down. She picked up her tea. She set the tea down. "Is it bad news?" Robert asked. "It is my stepmother's particular form of good news," Sadi said. "Which is to say, good news for her conveyed in a manner designed to ensure I feel the appropriate gratitude for having made it possible." Wirt was quiet. "And she reminds me," Sadi said, and her voice had taken on the particular quality it acquired when she was managing something difficult, "that I have served my family." That phrase served, she looked up as though a daughter is a resource to be deployed. "She is not wrong," Robert said carefully, "that the settlement resolved the family's debts." Sadi looked at him. "That is," he stopped. "I mean that the practical outcome." "I know what you mean," she said. Her voice had gone flat. "You mean that the transaction was a sensible one, and that the results are satisfactory, and that perhaps the manner in which it was executed is a secondary concern relative to the outcome achieved." He had the look of a man who has said the wrong thing and is attempting to determine how wrong. "That is not what I meant," he said, but there was a hesitation in it. The hesitation of a man who is not entirely sure that it isn't what he meant. "It is exactly what you meant," Sadi said. She stood up from the table. She was not going to cry. She was furious, which was better than crying, fiercer, and more useful. "You are an intelligent man, Robert, and I have given you considerable credit for it. But I want you to hear me clearly. I am not a problem that was solved. I am not a resource that was deployed. I am a person who was handed to a stranger to pay off a debt she did not incur, and the fact that the stranger has turned out to be—" She stopped. Her voice was not entirely steady. She made it steady. "The fact that this is not as terrible as I feared does not erase the terms of the original transaction." The room was very quiet. "No," Robert said. He said it with a quietness that was different from his usual quiet, lower, more fundamental. "It does not." "Then please do not," she said. "Speak about it as though it does." She walked out of the breakfast room. She was halfway down the corridor when she heard his cane on the floor behind her. "Sadie." She stopped, did not turn around. "You are right," he said. "I spoke carelessly. And not only this morning." He paused. When he continued, his voice had the quality she had come to recognize as his form of effort. The voice of a man pushing past the point where he would have stopped. "I arranged this marriage because I required one. I selected you." He paused on the word, and she understood that he heard what was wrong with it. "Because the terms were convenient. I told myself that was enough. That convenience could become something livable." Another pause. I was not thinking about you. I was thinking about the problem." "You are not the problem." She turned around. He was standing 6 feet away in the corridor, his cane in his left hand, and his face was doing something she had only seen it do twice before. It was entirely undefended. No neutrality, no studied control, just a man who had said a thing he could not unsay and was not trying to. "No," she said, "I am not. I know that now." He said, "I knew it before now. I am not practiced at." He made a short, frustrated gesture. The gesture of a man fighting his own language. "I have spent 3 years ensuring that nothing could get inside my defenses. You have been dismantling those defenses for 4 months by being relentlessly yourself." "And I have been. I have not been telling you what that costs me, because I did not know how." Sadi looked at him for a long moment. "What does it cost you?" she asked. "Everything," he said simply. "It costs everything. And I find that I would pay it." He, corridor 2 feet apart, breathing. "I am still angry," she said, though it was less true than it had been 5 minutes ago. "I know," he said. "You should be. I behaved badly and I will work to be better." A pause. "I'm somewhat better than I was 4 months ago. I believe you are considerably better," she said. "Don't make me tell you that too often, or it will go to your head." The smile. The rare, uneven, genuinely his smile appeared. "I wouldn't presume," he said. "It happened the way certain inevitable things happen. Not with announcement, not with the dramatic architecture of a scene designed for it, but quietly, in the middle of an ordinary evening, when both of them had simply stopped pretending that ordinary was what they wanted. She had been reading in the library. He had come in an hour after dinner, as he sometimes did now, and settled into the chair across from hers with a book he did not open. She was aware of him not opening it. He was aware of her being aware. This particular awareness had become, over the weeks since the kiss in the corridor, a presence of its own, in every room they shared. A third thing, patient and insistent waiting. "You're not reading," she said without looking up from her own page. "No," he agreed. "Neither am I," she said. She looked up. He was already looking at her. Had been, she suspected, for some time, with an expression that was entirely open and entirely his. The expression she had been watching slowly emerge over months from behind the layers of war and withdrawal. He was not performing composure. He had simply run out of reasons to maintain the distance. "Sadie," he said. Her name in his mouth still did something to the air. "Yes," she said, not as an answer to a question, as a decision. He understood. Of course, he understood. He had always been beneath the silence, exceptionally good at understanding her. He set his book aside. She set hers aside. He rose from his chair, and the cane was there, and it did not matter. She had long since stopped seeing it as anything other than part of him. The way the scar on his hand was part of him. The way the slight hesitation in his step was part of him. All of it woven into the person she had been falling toward without permission for months. She went to him rather than waiting for him to come to her, which was, she would think afterward, entirely characteristic of both of them. What followed was not a performance of romance. It was better than that. It was two people who had been honest with each other about difficult things, discovering that honesty extended here as well. That the same quality of attention he brought to his drawings and she brought to her reading was available in this room, in this quiet, in the specific and unhurried business of learning the language of another person completely. He was gentle where she had not expected gentleness. She was not gentle where he had not expected otherwise. They were both in the end surprised by each other, which was, she had decided some time ago, the best possible outcome of any encounter with any person worth knowing. Afterward, in the dark, with the fire reduced to a warm glow and the grounds outside the windows held in deep autumn stillness, he said, "I want to say something." "Say it," she said. "I was afraid," he said. "Not of this." She understood he did not mean this. "I was afraid of wanting something this much and losing it. I am. I have lost things. I know what that costs." A pause. "I kept you at distance because I was already losing the battle and I knew it. And I thought if I did not acknowledge it, perhaps it would remain manageable." "Was it?" she said. "Manageable." A quiet, woeful sound that was as close to a laugh as she had heard from him before the assembly. "No," he said. "Not for a single day." She settled closer against him. His arm tightened around her, not urgently, but with the particular quality of someone holding something they intend to hold for a long time. "It's not manageable for me either," she said. "I stopped trying to manage it somewhere around the greenhouse." "The hella-or," he said. "The hella-or," she confirmed. Outside the autumn, wind moved through the grounds. Inside, the fire breathed its last and went to embers, and neither of them moved to relight it, and the dark was entirely comfortable. It was Tom, of all people, who told her, Tom who had advanced, from F through the entire alphabet, under Sade's instruction, and was now reading with a ferocity that the Duke had accommodated by installing a small schoolroom in the East Wing and hiring a tutor. Tom, who had apparently formed an attachment to the Duke that expressed itself in the way of 9-year-old boys through intense observation and the periodic delivery of unsolicited information. He found Sadie in the library on a cold afternoon in December and told her with the directness of the young that the Duke had told Mr. Carver, the tutor, that the idea for the schoolroom had been the Duchess's and she was to get full credit for it if anyone asked. He said that Sadie said, Tom nodded, he said he'd been meaning to do it for months and hadn't, and that was on him, and that you were the one who made it happen. So, it was yours. Tom considered this. I thought you'd want to know because you always look like you're not sure what he's thinking. Sadie looked at this 9-year-old boy with genuine respect. That is a remarkably accurate observation, Tom. Tom shrugged with the modesty of someone who knows they are good at something. I watch him a lot, he said. He's the kind of man that you have to watch for a while before he makes sense. How long? Sadi asked. Before he made sense to you. Tom thought about it seriously. About 6 weeks, he said. He brought me an apple once and didn't say anything about it. Just left it on the fence post by my bunk. I knew after that. Sadi sat with this image. The Duke of Redfield, walking through the stable yard, leaving an apple on a fence post for a 9-year-old boy from the workhouse and saying nothing about it, and felt something in her chest arrange itself into a configuration she recognized. Love was, she had always suspected, less dramatic than it was described. It arrived, not in thunder, but in accumulated small things. An apple on a fence post, a school room in the East Wing, winter flowers in a greenhouse, a man choosing the honest words over the comfortable silence, even when it cost him. A dance near a window, carefully positioned, where no one would be standing behind him. She had been falling for some time. She had simply finally arrived. She told him on a Sunday evening in December, when the first frost had settled over the grounds and the hayor in the greenhouse were showing their first cautious blooms. She had been working up to it for a week, composing the statement in her head the way she composed arguments, with precision and clarity, and the removal of anything superfluous. In the end, she said it at dinner in the middle of a conversation about an entirely different topic, because that was when it arrived fully formed and unwilling to wait. I love you, she said. I wanted you to know. It seemed important to say it plainly rather than to perform it gradually and hope you eventually noticed. Wirt went completely still. Not the stillness of surprise, or not only that, the stillness of a man to whom something extraordinarily important has just been said, and who is applying the full force of himself to receiving it correctly. When? He said. It was not the question she had expected. I'm not certain of the exact date, she said. It was not a single moment. It was the notebook in the library, and the stable boy, and the dance, and the corridor after the argument. It was accumulated. She looked at him. When for you? He was quiet for a long moment. The chapel, he said. Sadi blinked. The wedding. You said you were there under protest. The ghost of the smile. You had been handed to a stranger in a borrowed dress to resolve a financial problem, and your first act upon arriving was to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. I had not. He stopped, took a breath. I had not been told the truth by anyone in a very long time. Not about myself, not about anything that mattered. He looked at her. I did not know what to do with it. I spent 4 months not knowing what to do with it. And now? She asked. Now, he said. I know. He set down his wine glass and looked at her with the open, undefended expression that had once been rare and was becoming. Slowly, his natural face, the face behind the face, the one that had always been there under the layers of war and loss and careful isolation. I love you. I have loved you since the chapel, perhaps, or since the library, or the greenhouse, or some particular evening at this table when I realized that the house was not quiet anymore, and I did not miss the quiet. He held her gaze. You have made this a home. I did not know it required one until you arrived and showed me what it had been missing. Sadi sat across the table from the man she had walked toward in fury and arrived at in love, and let the warmth of that settle through her completely. That, she said, was considerably more poetic than I expected from you. I have been composing it, he said with perfect seriousness, for approximately 6 weeks. She laughed a real laugh, the kind that arrived without warning and couldn't be managed. And he watched her laugh with an expression that was unguarded and warm and entirely his. And then he laughed too, quietly, the sound of it new in the room, like the first note of something that had not yet been played here before, but intended to be played often. Later, much later, after the fire had burned low, and the candles had shortened, and the house had settled into its deep winter quiet, they sat together in the library. She was reading. He was drawing a new sketch, small and precise, of the grounds scene from the east window. She knew it was the grounds because she could see the faint lines of the rose hedge, and in the corner of the page a small figure at the window who might have been her. He did not show her. She did not ask to see it. Some things were communicated in the knowing and not the showing, and they were both learning the grammar of that. The frost outside made the windows glow faintly with the light of a 3/4 moon. Somewhere in the greenhouse, the hella ore were blooming in the dark. Sadi turned a page of her book and thought, I did not choose this. I was brought here in anger, in grief, in the cold certainty of sacrifice. I arrived ready to endure and found instead something worth building. She thought the best things perhaps are rarely the ones we would have chosen if left entirely to ourselves. The best things arrive like he did, unexpected, difficult, guarded, and honest, and full of quiet apples left on fence posts and winter flowers grown for a dead mother. And they ask of you not that you surrender, but that you stay and look and learn to read the language of a person who has forgotten how to be known. She thought, I am going to know this man entirely. It will take years. I have years. Across the library, without looking up from his drawing, Robert said quietly, You're smiling. I'm happy, she said with complete simplicity. He was quiet for a moment. Then, yes, he said in the tone of someone reporting a new and remarkable natural phenomenon. So am I. She turned another page. He made another line. The frost held the grounds in pale light, and the house that had been silent was silent no more. Full instead, with the soft sounds of two people who have found, against considerable odds, and through no small amount of stubbornness on both sides, that they are exactly where they are supposed to be. The spring assembly in town was, by unanimous agreement, the most attended event of the season, a development that Mrs. Parton attributed to the mild weather, and that Cook attributed to the improved refreshments, and that Tom attributed with the confidence of someone who has been watching closely to the fact that people wanted to see the Duke dance. He danced twice, both times with his wife. The first dance was a waltz, and he managed it with the ease of someone who has been practicing quietly in an empty ballroom on Tuesday evenings for the better part of a year, a fact that Sadi had discovered 3 months prior when she came looking for a book she had left in the music room and found her husband in shirt sleeves working methodically through the steps of a waltz to no music at all, counting quietly under his breath. She had watched from the doorway for 5 full minutes before he sensed her. When he turned, she had expected embarrassment. She had received instead a look of absolute unrepentant determination. I am going to be better at this, he had said, than I am currently. I know, she had said, and went to find her book and smiled all the way back to the library. Between the first dance and the second, Millicent found Sadi near the punch table. Her golden curls were slightly damp from the dancing, and her face had the earnest, worried look that it wore when she was being entirely sincere. I need to tell you something, she said. Her voice was different, not the anxious, appeasing voice she usually deployed. This voice was lower, more difficult, the voice of someone who has been sitting with a thing for a long time and has finally decided to put it on the table. Sadie turned to face her fully. Why, when Mother told us, Millicent said, when she told us it would be you, I was relieved. She said the word as though it tasted of something she was not proud of. I was relieved, and I let myself be relieved, and I did not say anything, and I did not object, and She stopped. Her chin was doing the thing it did when she was refusing to cry in company. I have been thinking about that relief every day since your wedding. I know, Sadi said, and I saw it on your face that morning. Millicent flinched. I was furious. Sadi continued, not only at your mother, at you too. For a long time she paused. It would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. You have every right to be. I do, Sadi agreed. And I also know that you were 17 and frightened, and that relief is not the same as intention. You did not put me in that carriage. You simply did not try to stop it. That is not a small thing, Millicent said quietly. No, Sadi said. It is a cowardice. But it is a cowardice, I understand. And I would rather you own it plainly, as you are doing now, than perform a guilt that tidies everything into forgiveness before the debt has been acknowledged. Millicent absorbed this. So you don't forgive me. I am working on it. Sadi said it is not a single decision. It is a series of them. She looked at her sister. You telling me this tonight directly, that counts. That is you being different from who you were that morning in the doorway. I noticed the difference. Is there anything I can do? Yes, Sadi said. Next time something is being decided over someone else's head, say something. You have a voice, Millicent. Your mother has spent years convincing you it is not useful. It is. Something settled in Millicent's expression. The look of someone who has been told a hard truth and has decided to be grateful for it rather than wounded by it. "Write to me," Sadi said. "Actually, write. Not through your mother. I want to know how your season goes." Millicent's chin wobbled slightly. "I will," she said. The following morning, Lady Aldrich came to call. Sadi received her in the formal sitting room, not the warm library, not the breakfast room where she and Rert spent their mornings. The formal sitting room with its high ceilings and its deliberate elegance. The room that said, "You are a guest here. This is my house." Lady Aldrich entered in her customary manner, composed, assessing. She noted the room choice. Sadi could see and recalibrated accordingly. They observed the rituals of tea. Lady Aldrich spoke about the assembly, about Millicent's prospects, about the quality of the weather. She was steering, Sadi knew, toward gratitude. Toward the moment when Sadi would acknowledge that things had worked out rather well, hadn't they, all things considered? And Lady Aldrich had perhaps seen something that Sadi at 19 had not been equipped to see. Sadi let her arrive at it. Let her make the turn. "You seem so settled here, so at home. I confess I'm glad that the arrangement proved suitable after all." And then she set down her teacup and said with perfect pleasantness, "I would like to speak plainly if I may." Something flickered in Lady Aldrich's eyes. "Of course you sold me," Sadi said. "Not in the dramatic sense of the word, but in the functional one. You identified a debt, and you used me to pay it without my consent and without consideration of the cost to me. I want us to be clear that I know that, and that I have not forgotten it, and that my present happiness is not a retroactive justification of that decision." Lady Aldrich was very still. "I am happy," Sadi continued in the same pleasant tone, "genuinely more than I would have expected. But that happiness belongs to Robert and to me. It is a thing we built. It is not something you gave me." She paused. "I will not thank you for it. I will not perform gratitude for an outcome that was incidental to your intentions. Your intention was to resolve a financial difficulty. You did that. This a small gesture at the room, at the house, at everything beyond it, is mine." The silence was for the first time in Sadi's memory, entirely on her terms. Lady Aldrich looked at her with the expression of someone encountering a landscape that has shifted without warning. Still recognizable, but no longer navigable by the old maps. "I see," she said. "I am willing," Sadi said, "to maintain a civil relationship for Millicent's sake and because my father loved you. But the terms have changed." She met Lady Aldrich's eyes. "I am the Duchess of Redfield. If you wish to visit this house, you will come as a guest and behave accordingly." Lady Aldrich looked at her for a long moment, then with something that was not quite respect, but was the first cousin of it. "You have changed." "I have not," Sadi said. "I have simply stopped being someone you could afford to overlook." The visit concluded with courtesy on both sides, and warmth on neither, which was, she reflected, an honest result. Not forgiveness, not rupture, an accurate accounting. Robert found her in the library afterward, sitting in the window seat with a book she was not reading, looking out at the grounds. "How was it?" he asked. "Clarifying," she said. He sat down beside her, not across from her. Beside her, close enough that his shoulder was against hers. He picked up his own book. "Good," he said. She leaned her head briefly against his shoulder. He turned a page. Outside, the spring was just beginning to arrive, tentative and pale green and entirely sure of itself. The way springs always are, as though the cold of winter is simply a thing that gets left behind. The second dance was announced. Robert came to find her. He appeared at her elbow, with the quiet, precise timing of a man who has been keeping track of her in a crowded room without appearing to. He glanced briefly at the door through which Lady Aldrich had departed. A brief assessing look, then offered Sadi his hand without a word. She took it. They took the floor. The music was the same slow waltz it always was, and the room was the same warm watching room, and he moved through it with the ease of someone who has made peace with being seen. Not despite his cane, not in spite of it, but entirely, simply himself. A man who had been to the wars and come home with a wound, and a wife who looked at both without flinching. She felt him relax into the dance, the particular release of a body that has stopped bracing. His hand at her waist was sure. His eyes, when they found hers, were steady and warm, and entirely without distance. "You handled her well," he said quietly. "I handled her accurately," Sadi said. "Which is better?" "Yes," he agreed. The music moved them through a turn. Outside the tall windows, the spring evening was soft and pale, the sky holding the last of the light the way it does in that particular season, as if reluctant to let it go. "I have been thinking," Robert said in the tone he used when he had been thinking about something for considerably longer than he was about to admit that we should travel this summer. "I have a list of places my father surveyed that I have never seen in person." Sadi looked at him with the sketchbook. With the sketchbook, the corner of his mouth moved. "And with you, if you are willing, I find my compositions have improved considerably with a better subject." She felt in the chest the thing she had stopped trying to name because it was larger than any single word. A warmth that was also a certainty, a happiness that was also a choice, daily and deliberate, the kind that does not arrive once and stay without tending. "I am willing," she said. They danced. If Sadi and Robert's story moved you, share this with someone who needs a love story today. Comment below. What was your favorite moment? And follow for more.